You're listening to Keith Sports News. All right. Hello. Welcome back. That's right. To Keith Sports News. KSN. How are y'all doing this week? How have y'all been? Yes. I know, it has been over a week since my last episode. I'm going to explain why right now. I want to apologize for disappearing for over a week. And normally, usually if I would do something like that, I would let you guys know, but I did not. So I want to apologize for not doing any episodes. I missed the last episode was the Monday after the Super Bowl. Okay, so February 10th. You guys know that I would usually do 2 episodes a week on Mondays and Fridays, meaning I would record the night before the release dates, which are Sunday night and Thursday nights, okay? So I missed last Friday's episode and last Monday's episode, so I missed 2 episodes, okay? Just making sure if this is really... Nope, this is episode 17, okay. There we go. Now it says 17 here. Okay, now let me explain why I decided not to do any episodes the last 2 weeks, even though I was planning to do them. There's actually a few reasons, but the main reason why is because if you follow my main channel, Eric Super Magnificent, and if you follow my main channel for years and years, during this time of the year is a big time for my main channel, okay? Meaning it was my YouTube anniversary, okay? And usually I would do some special streams during that time of the year, okay? Just like my birthday in 3 months. But it's not only just that, but I'm also about to hit 2,000 videos on that channel, and I'm going to premiere it either Saturday or Sunday afternoon, okay? And I've been working on that all week. It's a lot. So that is the main reason why I missed the last Monday and the Friday of last week. I missed those days because of me focusing on my main channel. Alright, so there might be some certain times or certain days where I won't do an episode. Let's say if I decided to miss a day or two, then I will try my best to let you know, even though I did not let you guys know. Because I thought, well, maybe I can probably still do an episode while I'm... Even though... Because I thought I would have time, But, and also I didn't felt like doing one. Another reason why is because there's really not much happening in sports after the Super Bowl in terms of, big events. But I came back. I decided to come back mainly for one reason. So, what are we going to talk about? Well, we got some baseball news I want to share you. Spring training has just begun, and the opening day will be in about a month and a week from today. March 27th, opening day. Okay, I did get some baseball ESPN notifications that I'll talk about a little later. All right. And some basketball news as well. But the main thing I want to talk about first was on what just happened the other night in hockey. That's right. And I'm talking about the Four Nations face-off. Okay? This was something that they came up with, and if you watch the National Hockey League, there was not an NHL All-Star game this year. They decided to have the Four Nations face-off this year because it'll be like a little preview of next year's Winter Olympics. Okay? And yes, that means NHL players will be in next year's Olympics. They missed the last two Winter Olympics. Last time they were in it was in 2014. They missed 2018 and 2022, and I forgot why they weren't in those two Olympics. Because I remember watching the 2014 Winter Olympics for hockey. It was really special, and I might have remembered the 2010 Winter Olympics as well. I don't know if I remember watching it. I don't remember it. Can't really remember if I really watched some of it live or not, because that was 15 years ago, and I was only 8.5 years old at the time. But years later, I did watch the gold medal final between USA and Canada on YouTube. They have the full game from Vancouver 2010, and that was like a very historic game because it was USA and Canada, So, but I forgot why they were not in the 2018 and 2022 Winter Olympics. I really forgot. But they can finally come back, so that's great. And this Four Nations face-off was well received. Positive comments from fans. A lot of people were watching this, mainly because it was really the only big thing happening in pro sports in America and Canada. North America, I should say. So, yeah, that's kind of how I knew about this. And what a great idea. They had four countries: USA, Canada, Sweden, and Finland. All four nations played against each other, and then the top two nations, in terms of the points standings, advanced to the final for the championship. Okay? And I know I never got a chance to talk about the Four Nations face-off, but this is the main reason why I had to come back on KSN to talk about this. All right? So, I gotta be honest. I knew what happened in some of these Four Nations face-off games, but I really wasn't locked into the games. It's because, like I said earlier, all week I've been more focused on my main channel, working on my 2000th video, and stuff like that, planning things and organizing stuff. But I had the game on in the background, so I was kind of watching a little bit, mainly listening to it, okay? And for the past, 2 hours, Yeah, the game ended about 3 hours ago. No, well, not quite 3 hours ago as I speak. About 2.5 hours ago. Over 2.5 hours ago. And I was watching and listening to the post game show. I decided to wait until after the post game show, and then here I am. So, well, good thing I remembered to come back. But my thoughts on the Four Nations face-off, I enjoyed it. It's kind of like a mini version of the World Cup of hockey, you know. And speaking of the World Cup of hockey, earlier today or yesterday, I listened to one of my favorite sports talk shows, Mad Dog Unleashed, with Christopher Mad Dog Russo on Sirius XM, and he had the NHL commissioner Gary Bettman on, talking about, you know, the state of the National Hockey League and stuff. So next year, the Winter Olympics will take place in Italy, and then the year after that, the commissioner said they're going to have the World Cup of Hockey. So wow, 3 years in a row, you're going to have something very special with countries facing each other in the sport of hockey. And I really like that, you know. I'm not a huge hockey fan, you know, but every year I would watch some of the playoffs and mainly the Stanley Cup final. And I mentioned before that almost every night, a bunch of nights, I would watch and tune into TSN Sports Center, which is the Canadian version of ESPN, because I have the channel, even though I live nowhere near Canada. And that's how I got into the CFL, the Canadian Football League. Started watching it for the past couple of years, and I'm really, really into it. So, but that's really where I get my hockey news. They would show a bunch of highlights, you know, because if you watch the American version on ESPN, they don't talk much about hockey. Although they probably did during the Four Nations face-off, but like on a regular, let's say next week, you know, the NHL season will resume. Probably not going to talk much about it until the playoffs, which playoffs are going to start in about 2 months, I think. Maybe less than 2 months. I know it's like around mid-April or late April, so about 2 months the playoffs will begin. And it's weird because the NBA playoffs will also start during that time of the year as well. It's so weird how you have both leagues happening pretty much at the exact same time of the year. It's like you can't be a fan of both leagues. But it is what it is, you know. But yeah. Alright, so now to the Four Nations face-off. USA and Canada. So the first half of the Four Nations face-off was in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And USA and Canada played against each other in Montreal first. It was a regular game. And yes, I do know about the national anthem getting booed. And I do know why that happened. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to bring politics into this. This is not a politics channel. This is a sports talk channel. Although I do listen to some politics news from time to time. Okay? But not as much as sports. Mainly sports is my thing when it comes to entertainment and podcasts and talk shows and stuff like that. It's mainly sports. Okay? And that's kind of how I started my own sports talk channel. Okay? But it is kind of weird. I mean, I understand why they were booing the national anthem. I get that, but it's kind of like, ugh, it's just really awkward. I kind of feel I feel bad for the singer that sang the anthem. You know, it's not that person's fault. You know, but yeah. So the first time they played each other, obviously the Montreal crowd was wild. You know, and I believe that's where the Montreal Canadiens play, that arena. And you know, the Montreal Canadiens, they won the most Stanley Cups championships, but it's been a long time since they last won it. And I believe the Montreal Canadiens are also the last Canadian NHL team to win a Stanley Cup final. So I think that was about over 30 years ago, which is kind of hard to believe because there were some Canadian teams that were in the Stanley Cup final since the mid '90s, but they all lost. They all lost. Vancouver was in it that one year, and they really should have. They really should have won that year. I think that was like 2011. They lost to the Boston Bruins. Then, of course, last year, Edmonton almost pulled off the ultimate comeback. And I mentioned my special KSN episode where I talk about my favorite sports championships of the year. Last year's Stanley Cup final was the best sports championship game or series of the year, in my opinion, because, you know, I was really locked into that, you know, especially when history was on the line in Game 7. All right. So USA did beat Canada in the regular game. And then, you know, USA, they won. They also won against Finland and Sweden, so they automatically advanced to the championship. And then Canada had to play against Sweden. The winner of that game was going to go and face the USA in the championship, and Canada won. So we kind of all knew this was coming, a rematch between the USA and Canada. This is very similar to the 2010 Vancouver Olympics. Yeah. And there's one player that I know that was in both of those. Sidney Crosby. Yeah. Well, he'll go down as one of the all-time greats. So, if you're wondering which team I was, or which nation I was rooting for, I was rooting for the USA mainly because the game was in USA. And, you know, Canada would usually win the gold medal in the Olympics, you know. But, you know, at the same time, I didn't really mind. It's kind of like the Super Bowl. I did watch the Super Bowl, mainly the second half, even though it was a blowout. But part of me didn't really care too much which team won. Although I was kind of glad the Eagles won, you know, mainly because a different team won the Super Bowl. So for this game, since I have the Canadian channels, I was watching it on Sportsnet, the Canadian sports channel. It's kind of like, do y'all remember the NHL on NBC years ago? I remember that. That was back when I watched a lot of hockey. But I think their last year was in 2020 or 2021. Yeah, it was 2021. Then the 2021 season, it was moved to ESPN. All right. So I had two choices. I can watch it on the ESPN broadcast, the American version, or the Sportsnet broadcast, the Canadian version. I chose Sportsnet, the Canadian version, because Team Canada was in it, and I do like the announcer. I think his name is Chris Kuberth or Colberth. He used to be the voice of the CFL on TSN, but then a couple years ago he left TSN to join Sportsnet to be the main play-by-play man for the NHL. And I was listening to him calling Stanley Cup final last year, mainly because a Canadian team was in it, the Edmonton Oilers. So, yeah, I do like the ESPN broadcast as well, but I was mainly, I guess because I'm just used to watching it on the Canadian version, but so that's what I had it on, and the game was in Boston, the TD Garden, Boston Bruins. They are a good team. They usually make the playoffs, but a lot of recent years they usually choke in the playoffs. But also that's home to the Boston Celtics. I think they are a great team in the NBA. I think they won the NBA championship either last year or the year before. I think it was last year, 2024. The Celtics won the championship. So, I think we all knew this would be a very, very close, tight game. And it was. This morning, or all week, in the mornings on my way to work, I would listen to Sirius XM, and I had it on NHL Network Radio. Because, like I said, this is the big thing happening in sports. Okay, the Four Nations face-off. And I'm glad. Let's say the Four Nations face-off didn't exist. I don't know if I would come back to do this episode, to be honest with you. But I'm glad this went well. This went well. Much better than the All-Star game. So, it was a great game. And both anthems were performed. And obviously, this is not a political show. This is a sport. This is a sporting event. You know what I'm saying? So, and it went well. It went well. They were playing for real, and that was really the best part, the All-Star game, they weren't playing like that, It was just a exhibition, as they would say. But this one, they were playing for real. Great game. Tight game. Someone made a prediction that it's going to go into overtime, and it did. And I'm glad it did, honestly. And the overtime rules are basically like the playoff rules, where it's a 20-minute extra period. It's not like the regular season overtime rules where it's only a 5-minute period and then a shootout. Nope. They didn't have that in the Four Nations face-off final. I guess we can call it the Two Nations face-off, because it's down to the Two Nations. Man, great game. Connor McDavid scored the game-winning goal. Connor McDavid had his moment, and good for him. Last year, when he was in the Stanley Cup final, and when they forced a Game 7, I was hoping Edmonton would win. But I wasn't upset that they lost, because the Florida Panthers, they lost the 2023 Stanley Cup final. So it's like, dang, losing back-to-back Stanley Cup final and losing it after blowing a 3-0 lead, a 3-0 games lead, you know what I'm saying, in a best-of-7 series, that would be like, biggest heartbreaker and probably in hockey history. But yeah. But good for McDavid. He got his moment. It's kind of like when Sidney Crosby had his moment 15 years ago in the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics. And yes, there were quite a bit of Canadian fans. So, and it was kind of like the Olympics, or the World Cup, like a mini version of it. And they showed the trophy. I'm like, wow, that trophy looks very, very nice. So, congrats to Team Canada on winning the Four Nations face-off. And most likely, these two nations will play against each other again next year's Olympics. I'm looking forward to that. And I will cheer for the USA in that one to get revenge. Yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was really great. And yeah, and now they resume this weekend. The NHL season resumes this weekend. Oh yeah, something that just popped into my head. Why wasn't the game on Wednesday night? In my opinion, the championship Four Nations face-off game should have been on Wednesday night instead of Thursday night. And I say that because the NBA had one game. I looked at their schedule to see when are they coming back after their stupid All-Star break. Technically Thursday. It was Thursday, right? But they had one game on Wednesday night. It was the one game that got postponed back in January because of the LA Fires, the LA Lakers game. But Thursday, all the NBA teams or all the other teams resumed their season. In my opinion, that's why I said earlier the Four Nations Championship game should have been on Wednesday night. There was not much happening on Wednesday night. Like, what was ESPN showing that night? Were they showing college basketball? I mean, March Madness, I get it. March Madness is not too far away. But I'm just saying, this is what I like to talk about the sports schedule sometimes, because sometimes it doesn't make sense. And another guy that does it is Mad Dog Christopher Russo, and that's why he's one of the best. And I agree with him. Let me tell you a quick story. Speaking of March Madness, I think I mentioned this before, but I'll say it anyways. The dumbest schedule I've ever seen in sports history or in my life was last year's March Madness Elite 8 schedule. There were 2 games one night. One was, I believe, it was in Eastern time. I want to say it was in Detroit, Michigan. Or maybe it was Boston. But I know the second game was in LA. One game was in Eastern time. One game was in Pacific time. And they were both in the evening hours. I'm in Central time, right? Okay, I'm in Central time. So, I mean, if you live in the East Coast, you're going to get some very late night games that are in the West Coast. If you live in the West Coast, you're going to get some early games from the East Coast. If you're in Mountain Time or Central Time, it's kind of in between. Sometimes Central Time gets late night games. Alright? So, this March Madness Elite 8, this one night, it was last year. And this is what I heard and saw on the schedule. Again, I said earlier, one game's in Eastern Time. I'll say Detroit. I might be wrong, though. But I know the other game was in LA, Pacific Time. Both games were on at the same night, but they were not on at the same time because the same network was broadcasting both games. So, and I forgot what day of the week it was. It might have been Thursday. Or Saturday. I don't know. But you'd think the East Coast game would be first, right? No. For some stupid reason, the Pacific game was first. It makes no sense. Now, for my time, I believe the first game started at 6 p.m., a little after 6 p.m. Central Time. The second game would start a little after 8:30 or 8:45 p.m. Central Time. So you're telling me that the West Coast games started after 4 p.m. Pacific Time And then the second game was in the East Coast, and that started at 9:45 p.m. Eastern Time. That is absolutely ridiculous. You're supposed to have the East Coast game first, and then the West Coast game. If you had the East Coast game first, it would have been after 7 p.m. Eastern, right? And then the Pacific time game would be at 6:45 p.m. Pacific. That would make more sense, right? It's not too late, not too early. I don't know what CBS or TBS was thinking that night, but I think the reason why they went with the Pacific game first was because the game on the East Coast was the bigger matchup. But still, it should not have been like that, if that makes any sense. And that is the worst schedule I've ever seen in my life for sports. Makes absolutely zero sense. So they better not do that again. And also the championship game, I know it's always on a Monday night, the March Madness final, which is weird. Just like the college football national championship game, it's always on a Monday night. Why can't you have it on Saturday night? Same with the football championship game. Like, isn't Saturday a big day for college sports anyways? And you're having your championship game on a Monday night? But the bigger problem is not that it's on Monday night. The bigger problem is that the game started late on Monday night. I'm talking about the people that live in the East Coast. It started at after 9 p.m. on a Monday night. That is absolutely ludicrous. Why? Then you're going to have the game's going to end at 11:30. Post-game show at midnight. People have to go to sleep to wake up early for work and school the next day. You can't do that. And they said, I remember, because I would listen to the certain shows, the past 2 years, they said the exact same thing. Why are you having the game so late on Monday night? If they do that again, that just shows that they are not listening to their fans. That's sad. So, and yes, I know I'm little after. My episodes are usually around 30 minutes, and I know I'm after 30 minutes. But because I missed the last 2 days, I will keep this episode a little longer because I do have more to talk about. Alright, so I talked about the Four Nations face-off. Again, it would have been better if that was on a Wednesday night. And also, another reason why the game should have been on Wednesday night is because the season resumes tomorrow, Saturday. It would have been better if they get Thursday and Friday off. 2 days of rest, and then the players, they travel back to whatever city they're going to for their Saturday games. But no, instead they only get 1 day off, 1 day rest. I find that kind of stupid in my opinion. That is why it should have been on a Wednesday night. You did not have much going on. There was only one NBA game that night. There was only 3 college basketball games in the SEC conference. That was it. That was it. At least that's all the ones that I knew. Thursday, the NBA resumed after their heavily criticized All-Star weekend. And by the way, I did not watch a single second of the NBA All-Star weekend because I just don't. I really don't care about that. But I listened to certain shows that would talk about how weird it was. Maybe this is something that the NBA should do after the success for the Four Nations face-off in hockey. I think the NBA should do the same thing for next year's. That's just me. Listen, not a big basketball fan, but I did watch quite a bit of basketball at the Olympics last year. That was more entertaining. I'm sure most of you would agree if you're a basketball fan. The Basketball Olympics was more entertaining than the NBA All-Star game itself, right? So, I think they should do something like that for next year's. Have like a mini World Cup, or do what the NHL did this year next year. I believe someone said, I think it was Tony Kornheiser, one of the best on ESPN, from Pardon the Interruption, PTI. In my opinion, the best ESPN show. All right. He said you can have an American team, a Canadian team, and then you can have like a European team and an African team. Or, I think someone else said you can do USA versus the world, something like that. Hey, I'm all in for that. I would probably watch that if they really were to do that. So yeah. Okay, now for baseball news. Okay. Spring training has started, and I don't really watch preseason sports because the games don't count. I'd rather go see a game in person. That would be awesome. But spring training, I heard that they're using robot umpires for the spring training games, okay? And for the home plate umpires ball and strike count, their zone, their strike zone, and basically the managers have challenges. I don't know how many though, but I saw a clip because the very first spring training game happened yesterday between the LA Dodgers and the Chicago Cubs, okay? And the very first inning, there was already a challenge. Basically, the home plate umpire called a ball. And I saw the pitch. Some umpires would have called that a strike. Some wouldn't. But this umpire called a ball. And I believe it was the Cubs manager. He challenged for his call, and it was overturned. Turns out it was a strike. So, yeah, they're using robot umpires. However, they will not be using that in the regular season. They're just trying this out in spring training, and I guess if it goes really well, then they'll use it next year's regular season. That's my guess. But man, that's going to be very awkward to watch if that happens. Another change, you know. I mean, I get it. You know, the technology nowadays is taking over the world. I understand that. But we'll see how it goes. It's kind of like if you watch tennis, sometimes, well, I guess I should say years ago, there were challenges in a lot of the tournaments because there was linesmen, the officials. They would call it in or out, okay? And players would get, I think, 3 challenges per set, I think. And they would challenge whether if the ball was in or out side of the lines, okay? So, if it touches the line, it's in. It's kind of like in baseball. Is it fair or foul, you know? So, but then, I think it was around the COVID year or the year after the COVID year, 2021, a couple years ago, most of the tournaments don't have linesmen. It is all electronically called. Yeah. Whether if the ball is in or out, it is all electronically called. So that's interesting. So, but I do like it like that in tennis, but for baseball, I don't know how that's going to work out. We'll see. Because I know if you watch baseball games, it seems like every game you see, the umpires call a strike where it really isn't a strike, and you got some that would call ball, but it's really a strike. It's really, the reason why that happens a lot is because, do you know how fast the ball comes towards the catcher's mitt? You know how fast that pitcher throws the ball to the catcher's mitt? Especially nowadays. Almost 100 miles an hour. Some of them can go at 100 miles per hour or even over. It's insane, okay? So, like, the home plate umpire's perspective, it's like, it's coming in so fast, even though the pitcher is standing very far away from the catcher. If you watch it on TV, or if you even go to a game in person, it's like, my gosh. It's insane. It is insane. So, we'll see how the robot umpires go for the spring training, but like I said, they will not have it. They will not have it in the regular season. Although a couple years ago they introduced the pitch clock, and I believe they used it both spring training and the regular season in the same year. I think it's because the year before that, minor league baseball was using that. By the way, I'm not really a fan of the pitch clock. My problem with the pitch clock is that it's too quick. If they can add an extra 10 seconds of that would be better. It just would be better in my opinion. Although they did not have the pitch clock in the Caribbean series that happened a couple weeks ago. They didn't have that, so the game was much slower. And they did not have the pitch clock in the 2023 World Baseball Classic. And also, speaking of that, that will come back next year, the World Baseball Classic. I always enjoy that. I wonder if they're going to have the pitch clock for that in next year's, or even the robot umpires. I don't know. So, anyways, other baseball news. Well, I have some positive news, some pretty cool news, and some pretty sad news that has to do with the ESPN network. I'll start off with the good news first, because that came first. One of my online friends told me about this. 5Tayer, if you're watching or listening to this, thank you so much. Sorry that I saw it late, but he said he sent me something here. Let me look at it real quick here. It's about some baseball news here. Basically, Joe Buck, the former Fox Sports MLB announcer, okay, he's coming back. That's right. Joe Buck is coming back to the MLB. He's going to call a game. He's going to call the opening day game between the Milwaukee Brewers and the New York Yankees. Yeah, that is, I believe that's on March 27th. And look, I have the ESPN article right here. I'm going to read this here, then I'll give you my thoughts. This is from the ESPN.com. This was from a couple days ago. Unexpected news. Joe Buck will call a Major League Baseball national telecast for the first time since 2021, when he provides play-by-play of the opening day game between the Milwaukee Brewers and the New York Yankees on ESPN. Buck's last national broadcast was with Fox Sports in 2021, when he covered his 24th World Series for the network. Wow, that's a lot of World Series he did, because every year the World Series is on Fox. He joined Chip Carey last year on the local broadcast of a St. Louis Cardinals game. Ah, that's cool. ESPN will air the Brewers-Yankees game in New York on March 27 at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Buck, 55, that's his age, left Fox Sports in 2022 for ESPN, where he calls Monday Night Football. He referred to the opening day assignment as a one-off opportunity and not a permanent return to the baseball booth. Joining Buck in the booth will be former Yankees manager Joe Girardi and Bill Schroeder, the lead color analyst for the Brewers. Oh, okay. Opening day has always been a signature day on the sports calendar, and personally, it remains special. Okay, that's what Buck said in the statement. Quote, ESPN approached me with this one-off opportunity to help launch the season, and it was a quick yes. Joe and Bill are both great friends and better baseball minds, and I know they will carry the telecast, while I just plan to be along for the ride. Burke Magnus, president of content for ESPN, added that Buck, quote, is synonymous with Major League Baseball, and his presence in the booth will be an incredible addition to our opening day coverage. The game between the Brewers and reigning American League champion Yankees will be the opener of an opening day doubleheader on ESPN, which will also air the defending World Series champion, the LA Dodgers, hosting the Detroit Tigers at 7 p.m. Eastern. Okay, and that is the ESPN article. So, first of all, those are two weird series. Milwaukee Brewers taking on the New York Yankees in the afternoon, and then that evening the Detroit Tigers taking on the LA Dodgers, the World Series champions. And of course, they usually have the World Series champions on ESPN, because that happened, I remember that happened in 2023 and 2024. Houston Astros, Texas Rangers, World Series champions the previous year, if you know what I'm saying. But the matchups are kind of weird, because you got a National League team visiting an American League team day one, and I'm not really a fan of that. They call that interleague series. American League, National League teams facing each other. And my problem with that is that now every team faces all the teams. So, okay, I always wish the Houston Astros a well season. They have to play all the teams, all 31 other teams. I don't know why. Well, I guess it's because of the money, the TV money. And that's my problem with that, you know. Like, when I started watching it, when I was really into the Major League Baseball, a certain team would play a certain division from the opposite league. So, for example, I remember, I think it was in 2019, the Houston Astros, they faced all of the National League Central teams in 2019, I believe. So, St. Louis Cardinals, Chicago Cubs, Milwaukee Brewers, Pittsburgh Pirates, Isn't there another one? I'm missing one, I think. Because I think, yeah, there's 5 teams in each division. What's the other one? Cincinnati Reds. Yeah. I wish it was like that, you know? So let's say if they Houston Astros, they have to face the National League West Division. So they would have to face the LA Dodgers, the San Francisco Giants, the Arizona Diamondbacks, the Colorado Rockies, and the San Diego Padres. That's it. Cool. But no, you have to face all of the National League teams? That doesn't make any sense to me. Why have leagues, you know? Again, it's for the money. And I know they still have to play 162 games, but I don't know. That it's just not the same what it used to be, in my opinion. That's why I'm not really a fan of the pitch clock itself. And what I really don't like, and most people, if not everyone, doesn't like this rule, is that stupid extra inning rule, the ghost runner rule, where a runner starts on second base in the 10th inning. And I know they do that just to end the game quicker. But like I said, when I was into it, they didn't have that. They didn't have that as a rule, you know? It's just weird. And that is why I don't watch much baseball games during the regular season. But I'm always into the postseason. But during the regular season, I do like to listen to this certain podcast, Baseball Tonight with Buster Only. This is kind of how I get my baseball news. Now for Joe Buck, I'm glad he's coming back. I've always liked him. I've always liked him on Fox Sports for both the MLB and the NFL. It's still, I know we're approaching 3 years since he left Fox Sports, but at the time, man, it was really weird that he's no longer on that network. To be honest, I still wish he is. I still wish he is on that network. Well, mainly for the MLB. I like him. I like him for baseball games more than football games. I just, because one of the first Major League Baseball games I watched was the 2013 All-Star Game. And I was watching it with my father. You know what my father says? When they showed Joe Buck in the booth, my father said, "That guy has a weird shaped head." And that made me laugh. And I'm like, yeah, he does have a weird looking shaped head. And he still does. He still has that weird shape of a head. But then, he called the World Series that year. That was my first World Series I watched. 2013 was really the first year I got into sports. So 2013 World Series was the first World Series I watched, and he was the announcer, and I would watch the World Series every year ever since. And he was doing the World Series every year until he left Fox after the 2021 season, But I've always liked him. And I know people didn't like him, especially in the 2000s, because, people say he was kind of like a boring type of announcer, but he's not like that now. So, but in the 2000s, I wasn't watching sports, so, because that's the decade that I grew up in. But I'm glad he's coming back, and I know he's not coming back permanently. But I will, hopefully, if I remember, I will tune in for that game, see how he does. And I was hoping, because past couple years, ESPN would always broadcast a wild card series in October, the postseason games. And I think 4 of them was on the ESPN networks. And I was like, well, maybe Joe Buck will come back, but he never did. I think it's because it was during the NFL season. But now that the NFL season's over, I guess they invited him to come back, and he said yes. It'll be interesting. But here's the one bad part to this, or the sad part. Another show that I really like listening to sometimes is the Michael K show. Michael K is the voice of the New York Yankees. Okay, and I was listening to his show the other day, and he said he's a little sad because he won't be able to call that game. It's only ESPN exclusive game. Because you know how Milwaukee Brewers, New York Yankees, you would also have their announcers. You'll have their radio announcers, but not their TV announcers. It's only the ESPN TV announcers. So Michael Kay, he would always call the Yankees' first game of the season, but this year he won't be able to because the game is only on ESPN. So he's a little upset about that, but he's at the same time he's also happy that Joe Buck is coming back. So that is kind of strange, but yeah, I've always liked Michael Kay, even though he mainly talks New York sports, and I don't live near New York. It's just like with the Canadian sports channels. I like it, even though I live nowhere near the country. So, yeah, Michael Kay, I'll also get baseball news from him as well. And that's a show that you can call into, just like Mad Dog Unleashed with Christopher Mad Dog Russo, the Paul Feinbaum show with SEC. And I've never called in any of those shows, and those are really like my top three favorite shows, sports shows to listen to. I've never called in, because when you call, you have to wait for a while until it's your turn, because they put you on a list, they'll put you on hold. I don't know how long. Sometimes you'll have to wait longer than expected, and when you're on hold, you must be ready. You must be ready when it's your turn, when they put you on the air, because there are some callers where, for example, hey Johnny, you're up next. What's up, Johnny? How you doing? Hello, Johnny. Johnny, you're supposed to be aware when it's your turn. Hang up on you, You got to be ready. So, but I've never called in. It's really because I really have nothing to ask, because I would listen to the other callers that call in. But if I ever do, I will talk about that. My experience talking to Paul Feinbaum or something like that. So, anyways, one last thing I want to talk about is the sad part. I got an ESPN notification, and it said this is now going to be ESPN's final year broadcasting MLB games. That's actually a little surprising. I've always liked the ESPN broadcast when it comes to their MLB coverage. That's why I wish they can broadcast the World Series instead of Fox Sports. After Joe Buck left, it wasn't the same anymore for me. Wasn't the same anymore for Fox. In my opinion, the MLB on Fox died after Joe Buck left. But this is now ESPN's final season. That's a shame. So, I don't know if next year, if it's going to go to a different network. I would like to see it on NBC. MLB on NBC, that sounds great to me. If they go to NBC. I know NBA's going to go back to NBC for the 2026 NBA season. Or no, I think it's later the 2025 season. This is technically still the 2024 season, even though we're in 2025. So, yeah. So anyways, that is it. It turns out it took me pretty much a whole hour to talk about this. And you know what? I might do that. If I decided, hey, I'm going to miss a day or two of KSN, I'll make it up to you. I'll talk for an hour instead of 30 minutes, and then I think I'm done talking now. And here we are, approaching 1 hour. So, again, I apologize for not saying in advance that, hey, I'm not going to do an episode next Monday and Friday. I just disappeared on you guys, but it's because I was really focused on my main channel because it was my 13th year anniversary, and my 2000th video on that channel will be this weekend, either tomorrow or Sunday. Hopefully. Let's cross our fingers. So if y'all are available on either of those days, come on in, tune in, and chat with me. Until then, have a great weekend, and I promise you I will be back on Monday. Have a great weekend, folks. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Keith Sports News.